Welcome to the AARP Tax-Aide New Counselor Training. My name is Maria Maggio, and I'm the District Coordinator for the AARP Tax-Aide program in our area. We have most of Plymouth County with a little bit of Norfolk County. We also have Steve Brashad, who's the training coordinator for our district. He'll be leading most of the training. We also have some experienced counselors and leaders in the district who'll also be participating in the training. Now, here's a high-level agenda of what we plan to cover today. We're going to talk about the program, organization, process, training and certification requirements. We'll try to get you some hands-on experience setting up your accounts, in particular, your practice lab account, which is the practice software we use during training and the practice tax software we use. Steve will go over the syllabus and the self-study program, and then we'll get into the first two sections of entering the tax data for the income. We'll cover a couple of the common types of income: wages, interest, dividends, and then alimony and unemployment, which we certainly see but are less common. We're going to go over the program and the organizational overview, and there'll be a number of important topics that we will cover as we go along. Now, here's an overview of AARP, the organization. There's AARP Services, the Financial Corporation, Legal Counsel for the Elderly. There's also the insurance. These are for-profit corporations. AARP Foundation is the nonprofit arm of the AARP, and Tax-Aide is one of the foundation programs. We're actually the largest of the programs. Again, separate from AARP itself, we are part of the foundation, which is the nonprofit arm of AARP. Now, what is the AARP Foundation Tax-Aide? Provides caring, courteous service that results in correct tax returns and the optimum outcome for each taxpayer, and self-fulfillment for volunteers. This is a very rewarding program for those of us who volunteer. It is not for everybody. Not everyone can do tax returns. Not everyone's comfortable with the computer, comfortable with the tax law. But for those of us who can do it, it's extremely, extremely satisfying and rewarding because we're really helping people who need it the most. Now, just a little bit about Tax-Aide nationally. The program started in 1968, which is for volunteers. We've just finished our 55th year. It's 78 million Americans have had their taxes prepared by Tax-Aide, making it the largest free volunteer tax program. It's actually the nation's fourth largest tax program, whether it's paid or free. So pretty substantial numbers that we do. Again, the absolute numbers aren't the most important thing. We want to do a free tax return, but a free and correct and accurate tax return. There's also volunteer income tax assistant VITA and tax counseling for the elderly, TCE. So there are other VITA programs that we'll also see operate in different parts of the district as well. Now, in 2023, we had over 3,500 sites nationally, 28,000 volunteers, did over 1 million returns, and got more than $1.3 billion of refunds to people. And we see this in our district as well, that the numbers have gone down since COVID, but are climbing back. I think we've both had a decline in the number of volunteers as well as the number of taxpayers and tax returns that we've been able to file. The goal is quality, not quantity, but we certainly want to help all those who need and want the services that we provide. Now, we have a new state coordinator. His name is John Pardo. So I'm a district coordinator. I report to the state coordinator, the Massachusetts state coordinator. Within Massachusetts, we filed little under 30,000 returns, 751 volunteers, a little under 200 sites. Majority of the returns we filed were single. Again, majority were 60 or over. The average AGI, if you see 38K, I think in our district was a little bit lower, and the average refund was $1,100. Now you can see here's the location of the site. Our district is over here in the on the right side where you see our location is Plymouth County. Um, and you'll see that there's certainly wide gaps. You see in the west, and you see the Worcester, and then there's a big concentration in the Boston and Metro West area, also along the Cape. Now, as I said, I'm the district coordinator. We got approximately 84 volunteers in the district. That fluctuates certainly as we have training and we see who's coming back or not, but we've been roughly in that number since we've actually gotten back to that number since pre-COVID. Um, as I said, Massachusetts South Shore from Quincy to Plymouth. And west, really, Route 24 is about our western border, although the eastern site is slightly to the west of 24. But for the most part, that is our district. Here are the District 6 local coordinators. Um, I won't read off this whole slide to you, but depending on where you may volunteer, you may want to make a note of the site coordinator of the site you're likely to work for. Steve is the training coordinator for the district, but he's also the Plymouth local coordinator. I'm the Situate one. I also volunteer here in Marshfield as well, so you can see the list of local coordinators. Here's a little bit of a blow up of just District 6, our district. You will notice that there's kind of a spot in the center where we really don't have a lot of sites. We keep trying to set up a site either in Norwell or Pembroke. There's kind of a gap in the middle. So we've been working on trying to recruit volunteers from those areas. And if we can do that, we'd like to be able to open up a site kind of in the center of the district. But you see, we kind of have sort of a circle around Plymouth County. Now let's look at the tax-aide volunteer roles. There are more roles than these, but these are the main roles that you'll see. The first is the client facilitator or a greeter. You're going to help a taxpayer feel welcome and at ease. You're going to help them organize their paperwork. Some people come in with everything all organized, the intake form, which is a form the IRS requires us to fill out, everything all filled out, answered, all the paperwork in order. And other people bring in the proverbial shoebox of information. Sometimes people haven't even opened their tax documents. So a client facilitator will assist both the range of those type of taxpayers and everything in between. A tax counselor, we're going to help the taxpayer prepare their returns online. We're going to have an interview with them. We're going to discuss what their taxes are, ask any questions to make sure that we fully understand the situation so that we prepare an accurate tax return for them. Make sure that we answer any questions within the scope of our training, and we can prepare amended returns. Most new counselors will not do an amended return their first year, a little more complicated than a first time return, but it is something we'll tend to do occasionally if someone has a mistake and needs something fixed, or a common situation is a tax document comes in after we've already filed their tax returns. Other roles, and again, less likely for something you would do your initial year, but certainly you may in the future. And this isn't even 5-year future; it's second, third, fourth year. So quality reviewer, it's also a tax counselor, certified as a tax counselor, but they will review a tax return that has been prepared by a preparer. Now, a quality reviewer will review a return by all preparers. It's not just new ones that do it. You're not allowed to do what's called a self-review. Every return we file is prepared by one counselor at least and reviewed by at least one second reviewer. So we always say you're never alone. There's always someone who is going to check your work. I found that very reassuring the first year that I was a tax preparer, knowing that if I did make a mistake, there was someone who's going to check what I did, make sure that the taxpayer wasn't, we didn't file an incorrect tax return because of some mistake that I made. Now, the local coordinator or shift supervisor, these are leaders of the site. Usually think about a local coordinator, and then a shift coordinator is, think of it as an assistant or a backup. And again, they're going to handle the management of the site. For you as a new tax counselor, if someone has an issue, something is out of scope, which means it's beyond what we're allowed to do. Someone's belligerent, and there's a rare cases. I mean, most of our taxpayers are extremely polite and grateful and appreciative of what we do. But if you do get a challenging taxpayer, we certainly expect you to just, pass them off to the shift coordinator or the local coordinator for them to handle. So, we're grateful that you're willing to volunteer. We don't want you to be subject to people who are complaining or have an issue. If something like that comes up, just pass them to your local coordinator. Now, other volunteer roles, preparing returns not for you. You can be a client facilitator. We need appointment coordinators, people who help set up appointments and talk to the people on the phone. Just make sure that what they're looking to do is in scope, technology assistant, and so on. No matter what your role is, you're never alone, always someone there to help. Client facilitators, sometimes, after 1 or 2 years, we'll then decide to take additional training, become a local coordinator. Tax counselors can become, mentors for people the following year. So there's lots and lots of roles and opportunities, both your first year as well as uh, as you grow and you get more experience. There's lots of opportunities to take on more and challenges and interesting assignments. Now, here's the IRS Volunteer Standards of Conduct. This is what's called the IRS Form 13615. It's an agreement that you're signing, saying that you're agreeing to these conditions. So you're going to follow the site requirements. You're not going to prepare false returns knowingly. You're not going to take any payments. Um, you're going to treat people in a professional, courteous, respectful manner. You're not going to solicit any business. So these are key standards of conduct that you agree to in order to participate in the program. Now, once you take the various exams, the IRS tests that you have to, you'll be able to sign this, and we'll go over how this works. They're actually got a new program, a new vendor with the software for generating these forms this year. So we actually don't know exactly how it'll all work. So just be aware you will do this in the future. Again, we don't have all the details right now, but when we know, we will prepare a presentation and show you how you'll take the exam. I always encourage people take the exam on paper first. So we have the exam today. It's open book. It's untimed, and you can, once the tax software for 2024 is available, you could take it on paper as soon as you feel comfortable, but entering in on the website, we're going to have to wait until the new website is available to do the exam. Now, here are the 10 quality site requirements. Some of these really aren't applicable to you. They're things that the site coordinator needs to do. Key ones for you to do is take the certification exams. Those are going to be on what's called Link and Learn. As I said, they're not available just yet, but as soon as they are, we'll do a presentation and let you know how the new software works to do the exams online and generate the 13615 form, and provide that to us. Intake and quality review. This is another thing that there's a new intake form. The basics of how this works is the same as it's always been, but there is a new form. So as soon as that information is available, we'll also do a presentation on that. It's very close to being ready. I saw a draft recently, but we won't just do the training on it until that's final. We want to make sure that we confirm with the photo ID and all the taxpayers we serve. We don't want to participate in any way enable someone to use a fake ID or a fake social security number to generate a fraudulent tax return. So we want to make sure we're confirming that. Most of the time, the client facilitators will do that, but we'll discuss that, and some of that is site specific. Make sure that we're using the reference materials. The 4012 is our main reference material for doing returns, and we'll show you where that is. We use a modified version, and we want to make sure that you're using the online modified version and making sure that we're following what's documented of how to do things and what we're allowed to do and not to do. Make sure that we sign and agree to the volunteer agreement. Timely filing of tax returns. Generally, for most sites, the returns are filed at the end of the day. There are requirements that say they have to be done promptly, but for the most part, if you complete them, that's going to be somebody else's responsibility to actually file them. Make sure that we post the civil rights poster that indicates to people. For you, is to make sure that we follow the requirements for civil rights. That's no discrimination. For age, for income levels, certainly for race, religion, sexual preference, anything of that type. So we're going to make sure that we are non-discriminating of any type. Make sure that the site ID number is correct. And for a typical volunteer, you work one site. You log into the one account you've been given. That's going to be handled automatically. If you do work at multiple sites, what it does mean is that you make sure that you're logging into the correct account for whichever site you're working. And then the same thing with the EFIN. I know even like in Scituate and Marshfield, they share an EFIN. So we're going to make sure that you're filing Scituate return. You pick Scituate as the EFIN. And again, we'll get into that when we get into the e-file section. And then proper security, following the requirements for security. That means not sharing private data, being careful with if you've got a W-2, that you're not like dropping it on the floor and forgetting it and, throwing something in the wastebasket that might have personal information on it. So these are quality site requirements that we're required to follow to make sure that we're preparing a correct, accurate, and safe tax return. Any problems or issues, report it really to the local site coordinator for resolution. If anything you're not sure of, better to ask. It's fine. We're happy to answer questions. Would much prefer to answer a question and resolve it before an issue happens rather than, deal with the issue after the fact. For the time commitment for tax counselors, the federal tax training, I say 40 to 50 hours over 4 or 5 weeks, and that's what we're in right now. We're going to do state tax trainings, probably 1 or 2 days, and it'll be in December. We will do some refresher training in January. That'll include both you as new counselors as well as returning counselors. And then during the tax season, typically we ask people to volunteer 2 days per week. Some people do 3, even some people do 4. But at least if you do 2, you kind of reach critical mass. If you only do 1 a week, certainly as a new counselor, sometimes, by the time you come back next week, you've sort of almost forgotten everything you learned the week before. So I think it's tough the first season not to do at least 2 days a week. If you're in a situation where you can only do 1, certainly let's have a discussion about that. We're not saying you can't do it, but that's what's typical. For client facilitators, we'll do a 1 day of training. There's some additional requirements to, watch some videos, but it'll really depend on the site process. We count on your commitment, but we recognize you're a volunteer. This isn't, you're not being paid for this work. So, what I feel like your obligation is just to communicate to us what you do. We have people who, sometimes will travel. They'll, go away for 2 weeks during the tax season. Certainly, if that's what you're doing, we're grateful for the time you're able to volunteer. But we just ask that you communicate that to the site coordinator. I know myself, if I have someone who's not going to be available, then I would just reduce the number of appointments that I would have those days that the person isn't going to be there. So that's really the most important thing, is to communicate, your availability. Now, obviously, someone gets sick. That happens. Just again, let your site coordinator know as soon as you know that there's an issue. For the scope, that we use the word scope to define what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Now, we are not professional tax preparers. There are hundreds, if not more, forms that potentially could be filled out. Some are quite complicated. But as volunteer preparers, we train on a fairly narrow set of tax forms. And those are the things that are called in scope, meaning we're allowed to do them and do a tax return that includes them. If there's just one thing that's out of scope on the return, the whole return is out of scope, and you need to, send the person to a paid preparer. We don't send them to a specific person. We're not allowed to recommend anybody, even if we know of someone, because that could certainly be considered a conflict of interest. If we have a friend that's a paid tax preparer, if you recommend them, then that could certainly be considered, getting a benefit, or getting a benefit for a friend, soliciting business. So we would encourage them to go to a paid preparer, but we're not allowed to specifically recommend anyone. In general, if something's out of scope, you want to talk to the site coordinator, and they'll talk to the taxpayer, and again encourage them to go to a paid preparer. But we'll have to tell them the bad news that we're not allowed to do it. Sometimes people will be upset. I mean, I always say to them, you don't want me to do this form or this part of your tax return because I'm not trained on it. And if I'm not trained on it, I could easily do it incorrectly, and that's going to cause you more problems, could cost you money, or could, the IRS could audit and find it's wrong, and then, you have to pay interest and penalties as well as the tax. So just really encourage people to say, you don't want us doing tax returns with forms that we're not trained on. The key is to try to identify out of scope items as early as possible. When you go all the way through the possible all the way through the process, and at the end you discover it's out of scope, we've done a lot of work. Even more importantly, the taxpayer has probably been there for a couple of hours. Um, so not only do they not get their tax return, but they spent a couple of hours, really wasted a couple of hours while we were doing it. So the earliest we can detect that it's out of scope, the better. So we have the client facilitators. I print out at our site and in Marshfield, we literally print out the scope manual. And if there's anything even slightly unusual, that the taxpayer brings in, a form that's unusual, we ask people just immediately look it up and say, hey, is this something that we're allowed to do? If it falls through the cracks from the client facilitator during the tax counselor's interview with the taxpayer, again, we'd ask the same thing. Anytime you have something potentially out of scope, again, just refer it to the local coordinator, who can then handle the discussion with the taxpayer. Um, Now, if for any reason you believe a taxpayer is not being truthful or or forthcoming, then not only are you, we would encourage you not to fill out their return. You're actually obligated to not fill something out if you believe something is not correct or accurate or honest. For those cases, again, we encourage you, just raise that to your site coordinator, who can then handle the conversation with the taxpayer. Now, even if there's something that is in scope, but if it's something you're not comfortable, you're not trained, you don't feel comfortable to do, then it's out of scope for you. So if someone comes in with some education forms that you've never done and you're not comfortable, then even if it's in scope in the program, if you're not comfortable, then it's out of scope for you. Refer it to another counselor. If there's another counselor in the area, or go to the site coordinator and say, I'm not comfortable with this. And then sometimes what I say to people is, watch over the shoulder as the other counselor does it. And then hopefully then you'll feel more comfortable being willing to do it next time yourself. But anything you're not comfortable doing, consider that out of scope, even if officially it's within the scope of the program. Now, for in-person tax prep, and that's what most of the sites do, we don't retain any taxpayer data or documents. So once the tax return is completed, or even if it's not completed because something's missing, we give all the paperwork back to the taxpayer. We don't keep anything. During COVID, we had a drop-off method. Most sites are not using drop-off these days. There's requirements about how things are locked and stored and logged, and the question of like, if we lose a document, where was it last seen, that kind of thing. Most sites are not doing drop-off. So for the most part, in-person tax prep is what we're doing. When the taxpayer leaves, they take everything with them, whether it's done or not. We're going to always wear a name ID badge, first name and the last initial. Um, we got a few different names, a few different Steves at the Plymouth site. Um, Keep confidential any personal information about other volunteers, so only use their first name as well. You're not going to give anyone's name or address or phone number to any taxpayer. We use a Google Voice number, so even if you have my personal cell phone, we'd ask you not to use it. When I talk to taxpayers, I give them the Google Voice number, just because I don't want to have my personal cell phone available for taxpayers. If they need to contact me, they can call the Google number, and then I will return the call. If there's any question about a lost data, just talk to the local coordinator. We'll have to do an incident report. We have to do one or two of these a year. I hate them. I'm embarrassed by them. But if they do happen, as soon as you can report it, the better. Common thing that happens is the printer is that you accidentally include a page or two of one taxpayer's tax return with another taxpayer. So be really careful when you're printing out things that there's not an extra page at the beginning or the end that's not related to the taxpayer you're dealing with. Now that's mostly a quality review question, but if you do print stuff out, say, there's some form that you're printing for someone, just be very, very careful. That's probably the most common way that we have lost data. Now, the question is, are volunteers liable? There is a Volunteer Protection Act of 1997. So as long as volunteers stay within the scope of the program, they stay within the scope of the documents, they don't knowingly prepare a false return, we follow the foundation's policies and procedures, we stay within our training, then the Act grants those who perform the volunteer work for nonprofit organizations immunity from civil liability. So, there is some protection, but we want to make sure that we're following the rules, staying within the scope, staying within our training, and that provides us some level of liability protection. Okay, that brings us to the end of the new volunteer orientation. Anybody have any questions? We'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much.